Well, we're really glad that you're with us today, and I'm especially glad for those of you who just switched plans after this morning's word and decided to join us. This is actually a conversation that started something like 15 or 16 months ago, so it's not necessarily new to some of us, but we realize that to many of you, this is perhaps the first time or the second time that you've heard much about this. Steve described this morning a bit of the wrestling or the discontent, the itchiness, call it what you will, that seemed to be arising in us as a staff team, in our board, as to what God would be doing in College Church in the years that are about to happen in our lives. And this began our process of strategic planning. Some of you were a part of the local church conference back in April, and at that time we were already pretty well underway in the process. And where we left things was you walked around this room, and if you remember, you stuck those colorful dots all over a bunch of ideas that we had started to imagine and wonder if when we thought about our mission, when we thought about our strategic values as a church, which you're going to hear more about in just a minute, and we started to define some wildly important goals or things that we believed God was calling us to embody those values, we then said, how are we going to put feet to these things? What are we actually going to be doing as a church, invest in as a church, in order to see these values come to life and these wildly important goals being accomplished? And so where we left things was just getting some input from the congregation at large on that. And then over the summer, as Pastor Steve was on sabbatical, there was lots of prayer and lots of discernment happening about how we move forward. And when we reconvened the board this August, the conversation became, okay, now we have to start walking forward. So we have to make some decisions about initiatives that we should pursue. That's kind of the point where we're at, coming to you today. The board has been working, especially since August, to refine all of those ideas that we looked at and said, which ones are we going to take on as a church? If you're listening to all of this and you're like, I don't remember when any of this happened, we have a short video to help catch you up to speed. So take a look at this.
Over the past 18 months, the board and staff and whole congregation's been working on a strategic plan for the next 3 years in the life of our church, trying to think about what it would look like to unite people, ideas, energy, and resources around things that fulfill our mission to make more and better disciples who transform the community and resource the greater church. The local board, staff, and congregation worked to clarify our values, resulting in a list of 5 that shape not just the results of our work, but our way of being together in community. Those values are transformation, generosity, community, humility, and diversity. Then we set out to imagine what behaviors would help us say yes to those values in our everyday life as a congregation. From that question came 4 wildly important goals that will receive our church's effort and energy over the next 3 years.
The first wildly important goal is becoming and stewarding a multicultural community. We truly believe there's something of Jesus Christ that we simply will not discover unless people of different backgrounds, ethnicities, and experiences come together to worship. You'll see this initiative coming alive with a church-wide emphasis on learning and cultivating diverse partnerships as we place intentional effort toward deepening relationships with churches that differ from us in ethnicity and background, and in the elements of our worship service as we seek to listen, learn from, and develop worship that reflects the global body of Christ.
The second wildly important goal revolves around equipping and sending shepherds with the good news. We've seen a lot of traction in our church through the Shepherding Initiative, and we're seeking to live out that commitment through a Center for Faith and Work that will help us build resources and relationships to allow us to see the work of God that's already present in the job we have. It's still early days yet, but we're dreaming that this center may include conferences, training, and focused apprenticeships in various fields of study, where people learn from others how to approach their job as shepherds. Our goal is to equip every believer with tools for shepherding in their specific vocation.
Our third and wildly important goal focuses on loving and serving our neighbors like Jesus. Those of you who are already familiar with our church know how Wonderspace has blessed our community for years by providing indoor play for children in Grant County. But as of October 2024, we've seen 2 new initiatives launch: Wonderspace Blue, a grief peer support program for children experiencing loss, and Wonderspace EDU, which seeks to help tackle the literacy challenges in our community through play. Both of these initiatives are explicitly focused on addressing 2 Grant County's most pressing needs: grief and literacy. And we're continuing to stay curious as to how this can be multiplied into other communities in the coming years.
Our final wildly important goal helps us to fulfill our mission of resourcing the greater church. As we've built relationships with other churches over the past years, we've seen certain inflection points in a pastor's life that shape the trajectory of the rest of their career. One of those is the start of their ministry career. So we're hoping to meet future pastors in that pivotal part of their formation by developing cohorts of emerging ministers who start and stay sustainable in focusing their professional time and energy on the local church. To that end, we'll be launching a new iteration of the Ministry Development Program, during which ministers will spend 2 years being developed in their character and competence while they work with us at College Church before being sent to another local congregation to continue serving. But first, our hope is to launch a ministry longevity program, which helps pastors who are already in local congregations gain tools to deal with challenges right where they are through additional support, coaching, and relationships that will help them cultivate personal and professional rhythms which feel more like a joy than a burden.
These projects aren't just things that staff will do. There's something for everyone to get involved in, from learning alongside other congregations to volunteering, giving, and praying. Over the next 3 years, these goals require all of us to continue to give ourselves to the ways that God is calling us to make more and better disciples who transform the community and resource the greater church.
Okay, now there's a test. You got the cheat sheet already. There were 4 wildly important goals, and they appear on the green side of the card that is on your tables. This is really where the conversation begins, and what you're going to hear in the next few minutes. Emily and I will just tag team back and forth, reiterating some of the ideas that you just heard presented in the video, but because there wasn't time for conversation when you saw it a moment ago, or because you might have glassed over by that time in the video, we're going to go over those and give you a chance to really ask questions and engage with these ideas as they come. Once again, the 4, what we called wildly important goals, are that we would become a loving and serving community that loves neighbors just like Jesus. We would equip and send shepherds into the marketplace or the place where you work, live, and play with the message of the gospel. Then that we would become and steward a multicultural community or congregation that gathers here. We look more like the world. And then 4th, that we would resource the greater church.
When we took on the wildly important goal of loving and serving our neighbors like Jesus, that didn't feel like a hard concept to embrace, but it was challenging for the board and the staff that were working together to figure out, how do we manifest that wildly important goal? There are so many needs in our community. There are so many ways potentially that College Church could do this. And so a few things came into our radar, our thinking about this. Number 1 was, what is already happening in our community that's strong, that's meeting some of the needs out there? We don't need to reinvent a program or a ministry that's already really well-rooted from some other entity in our community. But we also wanted to look at, what are we already doing that seems like it's truly meeting a felt need here. And Wonder Space drew our attention very quickly. If you've never been in this room during a Wonder Space play date, I so want to encourage you to come and be a part of this. It's children with their parents or their caregivers interacting together, recognizing that children develop through play. We've seen I heard Pastor Stephanie talk about play is the work of children. And so they're learning and growing through that activity, but our community doesn't have spaces, especially in the cold or wet winter months, to do this. But as Pastor Stephanie and Stacy Ruberg, our Wonder Space director now, have taken this and considered the other challenges of our community, primarily literacy, and grief. Yeah. So many children in our community who have lost particularly a parent or a caregiver to death or disease, whatever the case may be. They came up with these ideas for Wonder Space Blue, which helps integrate play with grief support, not only for children, but also for their caregivers. And then Wonder Space EDU, which is a beautiful partnership with Indiana Wesleyan University, where we're working on literacy skills for children, coming alongside what they're getting at home and at school and utilizing the resources that we already have in this community. The incredible blessing beyond all of this is that thanks to the hard work of Pastor Stephanie and her team, this initiative is actually already funded through 2028 through the Lilly Grant that you've heard so much about. But we just feel like this one, we kind of have a start already on. We're moving forward. And so we didn't feel like we needed to reinvent the wheel here, but look to really allow this to become a part of the lifeblood of College Church over the next 3 to 4 years.
So each one of these big goals that you have in front of you, we kind of started with like a statement that's saying, what is the problem? For the second one, how do we equip and send like shepherds into the place where you work, live, and play? The problem we sensed was that the culture was becoming more and more secular, harder and harder to reach, less and less interested in traditional conversations about Jesus. But oddly enough, at the same time that was happening, we sensed God was raising up people within our own congregation who were coming on fire. And they were looking for ways to present the claims of their faith in these once secular places. So that was kind of the paradox. On the one hand, it seems to be getting darker, but on the other hand, it seems like God is lighting fires within members of our congregation. So the one big idea that came out of this wildly important goal was that we would launch a center for faith and work. Let me tell you what that might be. I think I mentioned in the message a moment ago that the focus in a secular culture is moving away from traditional churches that present the gospel in traditional ways. So far, the only answer for that is more church planting, which when it comes down to it is just planting more interesting versions of church. What a Center for Faith and Work recognizes is that there is a growing culture that are interested in Jesus, but less interested in traditional church. And so it becomes something like a denomination for a different kind of denomination. It's like a headquarters for a different kind of denomination. This identifies all laity already embedded in the very places in Grant County and beyond that we've been praying God would redeem, and it teaches them and then releases them to pastor in those places. So far as we know, there's about 6 or 8 of these centers in North America, and our first step is to visit them. What I've seen from their websites is that most of them offer courses. Of course, ours would too. But in addition to that, we think pastoral care, visits with people in the workspace while they're in that workspace would be critical to releasing laity into their movement as called pastors and shepherds. So for now, we have a lot of work to do, but and there's only one initiative for this second goal. But as someone said, it is a doozy of an initiative. Right now, College West is ahead of every other church in the Wesleyan Church. And that's not coming from me, that's coming from headquarters. They're saying you guys are way ahead when it comes to this work and faith idea. So what I envision is that we would launch it because someone has to launch it. Someone's got to go first. But it could be that over time we don't own it because other churches and universities will start leaning into this and saying, wait a minute, like you, we're sensing the game is changing and we need to be ready in an entirely different way. So our calling here is to launch the center. First, we have to investigate it. We have a lot of work to do. And then within 3 years, launch this and then start training and releasing and then empowering while they're there our own laity in our church and in other churches that's just getting started. I'm up next, right? Good. Then I'll be done. You'll be glad. The third one then is becoming and stewarding a multicultural community. The challenge, the problem that we faced when we hit this one was twofold. The first is that most of the people attending College West are white, middle class, pretty well settled in life. And there isn't anything wrong with that, but that isn't what the typical Christian in the world looks like today. The second problem is that the moment you start talking about changing your demographics, some people in your community get scared about you becoming woke. So now, when you want to change, is the hardest possible time to change because the language has all been taken over. Are you tracking?
Yeah, good.
So what this goal calls for is a multicultural community that looks like and acts like more of a cross-section of the world, the kingdom of God across the world, not just Grant County. There's a few ways that we're going to come at that. One is that we're going to do something like an all-church campaign. That's going to involve groups, it's going to involve preaching, it's going to involve little initiatives that we launch within our church to try to get our church, y'all with me, to understand that the culture is changing faster than we are. Two is we're going to partner with two mostly non-white congregations. Shoot, we already have. We've had become with us for like Super Sunday the second time in a row just a couple weeks ago, and y'all said you love that. And we've been involved with real community in working on the Bowman Stone Park and with joint services. So there will be more of that to come, and maybe even congregations outside of that. But you'll start to see us leaning into formal partnerships with congregations that are not primarily like us. And third, if we'll start in much the same way that we would with the work in faith, we have to visit some of these congregations. I was in one 2 weeks ago that was about 55, 60% mostly African American, but not completely. And then about 40 to 45% white. And they tore the place down in that worship service. The energy in the room was high and people were leaning in. And what I loved more than anything is the subject of becoming multi-whatever, never came up. They just were. They loved each other as people. And God was almost unbeknownst to them, blending together this beautiful congregation that resembled the demographics of the place where they lived. And Ryan Ott was with me. Gary, your son, was with me. And after the third service, I think we both walked out of there and just thought, wow, boy, whatever this is, wow, I want more of this in high doses. So that's the third big initiative, is what do we do as a congregation to become more like the congregation of the world?
The last wildly important goal then that we identified aligns very wonderfully. You'll recognize the language with our mission statement, but it's resourcing the greater church. And this goal really was driven out of communication that we have had with other churches and with our denominational leaders, pointing out where there are needs in the greater church and how College Church might have resources that we can pretty easily share with others. I mean, I think there's a lot of work in it, but the reality is we have an abundance here in so many ways. One of those ways we've done in the past, you might remember the days of having a ministry development program. We had resident pastors, some formal internships. We hope to return to that practice in the near days. And why this matters is because we have people who are serving in various communities. A few of them are here. Jordan Reif is a former resident pastor that God allowed us to keep here on staff. Alex Mandura was with us for a season. He's now at Wesley Seminary. Your son-in-law, Patrick Cooper, serves up at All Shores in Michigan. We could go on and on. Riley Olson was here this summer. He was another one. So many. We could just, Logan Hoffman, he's in the back of the room. We have so many. I can't stop now. Okay. The point is, this ended for a season. Lots of reasons there. One big one was the pandemic. Stopped a lot of things, but that was just a reality we dealt with. And we hope to return to this because it's not only that College Church has staff people who can mentor and programs that we can let someone help us lead, but one of the things that so many of our former resident pastors mentioned was their relationships and interactions with our congregation that was forming. They were mentored, they were encouraged along the way. And I heard a lot from congregation members saying that relationship was really meaningful to me and made me feel a part of the ministry of the church. There's another side to this thing, though, that sort of came onto our radar, again, primarily through kind of desperate emails and phone calls that we would get. Some of it anecdotally through district superintendents in our denomination saying, we have pastors who are leaving in droves. They're tired, they're worn out. They don't know if they can continue, and they just need some encouragement. They need some revitalization of not only their spirits, but maybe their minds in some cases, just to be restimulated. And so we started thinking about this, and we've done a few things, admittedly, around here, held conferences or events that we thought, well, this would be fun. We have people here from all over the place, Taylor, Indiana Wesleyan, who can contribute in wonderful ways. Our community leaders, this last April, we did a Marketplace Multipliers Conference where people in our congregation who are business people came in and encouraged others who are ministering in those places. And the truth is, we put a lot of effort into this, but it's not that hard. Like, we do these things and then we go, oh, look at that. People want to come to Marion. It's kind of a funny thing, but they do. And they come and they participate in these things. And what we hear afterwards, our pastors saying, thank you. That's the shot in the arm I needed to keep going. That's the encouragement I needed. Those are the connections I need to have. And so we want to do that in a more purposeful way. And that's through what we're going to call the Ministry Longevity Program, which is something that we believe we are called to for the sake of other churches. These are people who likely, some of you may never meet. They may not interact with you, but that we believe we can make a contribution to help pastoral health and longevity, not only in our tradition, but across the board in the church at large.
And that's been happening, right? And this has already been happening to some extent. I meet people who sneak into College West, and then they stay about 4 or 5, sometimes a year, and then they leave, and then they go back into ministry. I met one guy in the hallway that said, I'm leaving this week. And I said, how long you been coming? He said, almost a year. And I said, oh, no, we haven't met. He said, no, but it's a good thing. I'm leaving to go back into ministry. I said, what? He said, yeah, I came and I hid in your back row and I just sort of got renourished while I was here. I met your people. I was involved in some low-hanging fruit ministry ideas, and God rejuvenated the call. I'm going back. So I was like, oh, man. Yeah, so let's do that on steroids. That's what we're really trying to do. I mean, in a more organized fashion. Now, what you've heard so far is 4 wildly important goals and about 7 different initiatives. What I want you to pay attention to is that most of the ideas that we've just put in front of you are not primarily about us. So they're not. Dealing with children that grieve, those that have fallen behind in education, dealing with people in the marketplace, dealing with pastors that either can't get started or they want to leave. Most of those do not benefit College West immediately. So I hope what you're hearing is that I feel like God is shifting the focus of our church. So the goal is not just about how do we become even bigger. It becomes more about how do we give to people in ways that we will probably never directly benefit from ourselves. So this is a huge sea change, I think, in the life of our church. And it's really the result of good leadership on the part of Jim Vermillion, who walked us through this. And then it's on the part of the church board, who just has been amazing in this process. Now's a good time to just push pause. And because I know that sometimes you'll hear a bunch of information and you'll get stuck on one place or another. This is a good time for you just to raise any questions that came up while you were listening to these. And then either Emily or Alex has got the mic in back, so he's going to walk around with them. He likes to do this, so keep him busy. Then either Emily or I will answer the questions, probably Emily. That's a setup.
I don't have a question, but I am so excited. I'm about to burst back here. I guess I do have a question. How do we say, oh, God's calling me to that thing? How does it fit in? Who do we go to? Where do we say other ideas we're still having?
Yeah, we actually, a question we anticipated was, how are we going to lead these initiatives forward? And we actually have a plan with the board. They just approved it last Monday night, which these will each have a team, a leadership team that is responsible to help push that particular initiative in the right direction. It will be led by 1 board member and 1 staff member. But then we will ask to get congregation members involved with those teams as well. So if you have a particular one of these on the card as you look at it and you're like, that's where I shine. That's where my heart soars. Shoot me an email. We'd be happy to take your name down, and we'll make sure that as those teams start to form, we just started that process this week, then someone will reach out and we'll look for ways to plug you in. Obviously, the teams that lead, they can only get so big or else nothing will get done. So one other thing I would say is, as some of these initiatives begin to evolve and push forward, there will be activities, there will be events, there will be specific needs that arise. And wouldn't it be amazing if we never in this process wanted for people who would lean in and help us get it done? That's the goal. Thank you for that question.
That can't be all. Come on. Come on.
It's a pasta coma.
You're beautiful.
I guess one question that I would have is, what are some potential challenges and pitfalls or traps that we don't want to fall into in seeking these?
Yeah, it's a good question. Just this morning, I think was praying through one of them. Can you think of another while I'm telling this one? Okay.
I don't know where you're going, so.
Me either. I think one of the pitfalls you can fall into is ego. I think whenever we want to do grand things, I think the adversary can take that ambition and hijack it. So it becomes all about us, even though it's done in the pretense of serving others. That would be subtle, and you wouldn't catch it at first, but it would take root in the hearts of the leaders, starting with me, with the staff, and with the board. And so as I was praying this morning, I was praying for a holy ambition, so it not get lost to ego, where people start protecting ideas or claiming ideas. Yeah, that was my idea. That's childish. So God spare us from that. Money might be an issue because what we're describing right now is not cheap. It's going to take a sustained, disciplined change in the way we learn to give to College West. So that's certainly a big deal. I mean, we can't do it for free, but that would be another challenge.
As I was listening, I think an obvious challenge that we've already sort of at least talked about, I can't tell you that we've come up with a solution, is it's a wonderful problem when you have people who want to do new things, who are innovative enough to think of new and meaningful things to do, but there's also that challenge of how much can you hold at the same time and do it well. And so we've already talked about this with the board to a degree, and I think there is still yet some chiseling here that has to happen to say that if we really believe that these are the things God is calling us to do in this next season, what do we put down in that season in order to make sure that these things can be done right and well? And again, I wish I could, maybe I don't wish I could tell you right now, here are the things we're going to put down, because then I might get stoned.
Just declare it.
But I wish we had perfect clarity on that, and we don't. That's a continued part of the discernment process, but it is definitely something that we could get tripped up on if we're not careful with.
Yep. Good answer. Jeremy.
Quicker, Alex.
Oh,
quicker.
yeah. Keep him busy, man.
Thanks. Thanks. Hold your hand too. I thought I was holding it.
He doesn't
I was like, anyway, thanks. Yeah, no, you're good.
He's like vice chair of the board. And
I was just went like that. I was like, oh, you're not letting go. I was just saying, pitfall. What came to mind is this is really contingent. It's dependent on the body. So if we just think that this is something we agree on, but the staff is going to lead it, it's not. It's actually quite the opposite. And so I just think it has to be our passion, our vision, our drive in the different domains and spaces that we're in.
Wow. Boy, good one. Yeah, that's like classic.
As Wesley would say, my heart is strangely warmed. We came from a church that emphasized nickels and noses, and that was the goal. In fact, they had one church in town they wanted to beat in attendance, and that was kind of drove them. And so I am loving this, that we're reaching outside of the church. We're not becoming ingrown. I just started work at the Salvation Army as information officer. I love it. For 40 years, I was either at my home office, at a church, or at a Christian conference, and it is wonderful to be meeting people outside of our cocoon, and I'm just so excited what you're doing, and my heart's with you.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thank you, man. Thank you. Chuck.
Over the years, in recent years, there's been significant emphasis on the whole process of spiritual formation and spiritual direction.
Yeah.
Where does that focus fit in with all of this?
It fits in the values. The first of the 5 values is that on the back, on the back side? Yeah, it's on the white side. The first of the 5 values is transformation, which So, Chuck, next Sunday I'm going to speak on the 5 values from Romans chapter 12. All 5 of these are tucked right in Romans chapter 12 in exactly the order that they appear on this sheet. It's almost like Paul wrote it. And that starts by calling for the renewal of our minds, right? Not transformation, not confirmation, but transformation. So we think it fits right in there. It's at the top of the list that makes every other one possible.
Gather the thoughts together. In terms of manpower and having enough people to go out, I mean, my brain is exploding with the things we could be doing. But if we have something that we can be doing with but apart from the group, that the group doesn't have to do, certainly take it through you, but is the right method to join the group and then, I don't want to say permission because I know you're giving us the authority to move forward, but come to you so we make sure we're following the big plan. Yes?
I'm going to hit the Emily button on this one here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the work of the people is the work of the people, Asana. You don't need our permission, of course. But in the same vein of what I was talking about of trying to hold what we can responsibly, there will be things that we say, hey, if God is leading you to do that, then we want to lay down the tracks for you to do that ministry. We just may not be able to hold it ourselves in the great plan. And that's what I hear you saying. But please, let's be in one accord regarding these wildly important goals, these values, and anything we can do to help make what God is birthing in your heart possible. We want to do that. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
good,
for
good.
sure.
Yeah, good. Yeah. There was a follow-up, I think. Chuck had a follow-up.
The follow-up then is, you're speaking on a Sunday in terms of transformation. I don't doubt that. We know your heart, our heart. Where in implementing that in terms of initiatives will that happen?
It'll happen, Ethan, I'm going to call on you in a second because it's going to happen in the areas of discipleship mostly and in spiritual formation. So right now, Ethan is generating some of the answers to that, but it's, so we'll focus on a lot on the groups, on more and better curriculum that will form that, higher accountability, follow-up.
Ethan button.
Ethan, hit the Ethan button.
I think some of what we're getting at here is a sketch of what we mean by more and better disciples, right? So we're following Jesus into priorities that Jesus is already doing, right, in our community and around the world. So some of that has to do with the way that we bring ourselves into these spaces. But I also think a lot of what the work of the church is doing right now is so focused on spiritual formation that some of the next 3 years is thinking about how do we bring ourselves, formed as we are, into spaces that keep forming us, right?
Yeah.
Because at some level, we can't be better disciples unless we're making more. Yep. And this really pushes into the outside of the church in a way that I think we can all be proud of in terms of our own formation too.
Good word.
Good one. Beautiful.
I'm just adding on to Ethan's because going through spiritual direction, learning to become a spiritual director is so much more than being a spiritual director. That when Ethan is talking about how places are being changed, when a person is changed through spiritual direction, they don't take that or it isn't isolated to when they are a director. It's their whole life. And so what he's saying here is Chuck's right, we need to take the spiritual direction initiative forward, but it is through everyone's life who is touched by it.
Christy, eventually we're going to get to you.
I get to Christy, then you? Okay.
That's okay. I think what I'm hearing is a lot of people are excited about what you're saying and they're on board, and maybe just a little bit of clarity, like we would like to do this. How do we communicate that with you? How do you communicate that with us? Will it be like a form that we can go on and say, this area, these are my skills? Or should we wait and you contact us for some particular area, like you said, that we feel called to?
Yeah, good question, and thank you for it, because it really matters as to what Jeremy was saying. This is dependent on your involvement. I think in a general sense, again, if there's one of these areas that you just feel really leaned into, I had a board member Monday take this card. We gave them an early draft of this and circled the thing that he was most interested in and said, this is the team I would like to be a part of. Okay, what we're doing yet, I don't know. And some of that is because we want this to be driven by those leadership teams, those circles of people. So specifically, I don't have a great answer for what you're asking, Christy, but I would say, number one, if you have a general thing that you're like, this ignites my heart in a new way, let me know. Be happy to pass your name to those teams. And then as those teams begin to develop their execution plans, they will each have different methods that they will release to the congregation in different ways. And so be looking for things in the bulletin, online, through Planning Center, all of these ways that we'll try to make sure you know, here's an opportunity for you to get involved.
Beautiful.
I think some of what my mic stand is acting up. I think some of what Chuck, you're naming is a thing that we did talk about on the board, and I think it's important to say, right? Which is that these are like the initiatives we feel called to in the next 3 years, but there are some things that are just assumed priorities. There are things that are part of who we are and have been for 20 years and will be over the next 3 and will be over the next 20. And I think that transformation is one of those.
Yeah.
And so it's not that we give up those sort of core things about who we are. It's about how do we take the core things about who we are and move them forward in new and exciting directions, right? So this is where the tension comes from that Emily's talking about like, okay, if we are going to move forward, are there things we have to give up? And that's where I think the fear, the possibility comes, like that we would give up things that are core to who we are.
Good.
So maybe we're going to need some help to make sure we don't do that. But the hope, the desire is to keep those core things, to be doing the transformative work that we're already doing, and then just be directing it into new channels.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Great answer, Logan.
I know that one of the wildly important things is diversity. And I noticed recently the Spanish words over the doorways were taken down. Is there a plan on those being put back up?
Yeah, we're going to paint.
Yeah. Just practical and short term. Yep.
When I was helping with the English connection, there was a lady who had gone to a Spanish-speaking Protestant church. And it had closed. And she was saying, where do we go for church? We're not Catholic. I don't know if there's anything that we College West can do about that, but my heart is for diversity.
Sorry, I just want to say, this is Stacy Ruberg. Stacy, I don't mean to call you, but I didn't see you over there. But there she is, our Wonder Space Director. So I mentioned her earlier. I didn't see you. Sorry.
In fact, I heard just last Friday there's a movement on our staff, Stacy for President. Is that true? All right, I'd vote for her. All right. Other questions?
This is really far out. So like, if this is like we'll get there kind of thing, that's a perfect answer for me. But diversity isn't only about ethnicity and race. It's also about abled people and disabled people.
Yes. Oh, boy.
And so is there an opportunity, maybe not in this initiative, but in future, to expand that involvement to more than just multiracial, multi-ethnic?
That's a great question.
Yes and yes. And we are learning and growing. One of the most heartwarming things to me, just very practically speaking in this, I'm not sure where this started, but Jordan actually helped us bring craftsman, I don't know what you would call him, a contractor in, but looking even the accessibility of our stage. How do we help people who aren't able to climb those steps? And so we brought a proposal to the trustees, and something like this could be pretty pricey, right? But they were looking at it, and they were trying to figure this out. So the board meeting that happened after that trustee meeting, they look at the trustee meeting minutes, and someone on the board saw that this was discussed and immediately was like, can we talk about this? This needs to happen. Well, now I've got the board saying this needs to happen. The trustees start to drill in even at a different level. And the next time the trustees met, what we talked about was they were looking at ways. What is it that Shannon Hawk, who's one of our trustees, had this software on the screen that we were all looking at. Abby Wilkinson was losing her mind because she thought it was so awesome how he was drawing out a plan that was taking out some of the most costly and challenging pieces to make this happen and making it happen. So this is just one example. We have a long way to go in understanding this, in growing in all of our understanding of what is involved, but it's an important point that you raised, and certainly part of what we're trying to embrace in that value of diversity. Thank you. Thank you.
Carol.
Pastor Steve, you mentioned using our imagination for creative ways in ministry. I just want to share that I think English Connection is exactly fitting into that category. I mean, they meet Monday and Thursday evenings, 5:30. And last week, the Catholic priest from St. Paul's, who is the Spanish-speaking pastor, walked in. A number of our people are Latino. They all looked and they said, "Oh, Father, Father." And he is there. And I sat beside him in one of our game opportunities, and he knows very little English. So he is there in our church trying to learn English among that group of people.
Amazing.
I just want to say that there's an open house on Thursday, November 7th. We would invite a lot of you who are interested in a diversity initiative to coming. I was told this week that they have 10 people who are waiting for mentors and they cannot find them. So there is a great need. It's right here in our church. Bud and I have both been involved in this, and it's been just a wonderfully inspiring way to work with in our community.
This is amazing. There was like 120 people in this room a couple weeks ago for the international dinner. You and Bud were in those. In fact, you introduced me to a couple of your friends then. I think I met 7 from a Hispanic background just in that day alone, and they were representative of a large and growing contingency in Grant County that is looking for a church home. And I don't know what this is further than we've written here, but those are things that we're taking seriously right now. If College West is going to keep up with the changes demographically, we have to become more aggressive.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess one of my questions is a more detailed question. But particularly with the equipping and sending shepherds one, you said you're kind of at the beginning of the initiative and you're wanting to build it, and you need to go visit other places that have started it to get ideas. Yeah. So what about those of us that would like to help build it? We don't necessarily want to wait until you've got a kind of a structure to plug us into. We want to help build the structure. How do we communicate that in a way that is useful?
I can think of a couple things. One is if we relaunch shepherding cohorts, we were remember putting together different domains all into one room. Participate in one of those. Table Ed has moved to a Sunday morning. That's once a month, right? Daniel's presenting something right now in that, so maybe join in that if possible. I know your lives have changed recently, but if there's a margin, you might slide into that. Do you want anything else? Okay. How are we doing, you guys? Yeah, I am so proud of you. Man, we have gone a long time, and this is College West, and not one person has mentioned money. That is amazing. Is it not? I mean, we were thinking about this meeting.
You just did.
Yeah, I don't count. But I mean, we had this conversation. We say, well, wait, we said, I'll give you 3 or 4 minutes before somebody says, how much is it going to cost? Would somebody please say that question, or we've wasted a long time preparing? Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I mean, so like Emily drew a bunch of graphs because that's what she does when she can't sleep at night. And then she presented 3 or 4 graphs to the board last Monday night when they approved this formally. And I'll save you all the math, try to point out some of the big picture things. In order for us to do this, add all of these things we're talking about doing right now, and continue to pay for Wonderspace once the grant runs out. And remember, that's going to be what, 2930? 2829. 2829. That's going to raise about 13% to our annual budget every year. That's 13% more in new dollars. Did I get that right?
You got it.
Okay. There's a couple of things we could do. One is if we pay off the mortgage that's on the church right now, which is about $460,000. Now, I know that number is going to shock you because that's more than your house is, way more than mine is worth. But remember, this church is $11 million building. You've had it 17 years, and you owe only 4% of the price of this church. So, I mean, give yourselves a hand. That is an amazing accomplishment in 17 years' time. So $460,000, while it's a lot of money, it is small compared to what the actual building is worth. The moment we pay off the mortgage on this church, we release mortgage payments into the programming of what we just described now. What that's going to mean, it's about $20,000 a month right now for a mortgage payment. That's $240,000 a year that we lose in mortgage payments. Pay that off, and that's $240,000 you didn't have a month ago. $70,000 of that we're going to give to the trustees so they can continue to replace the parts of the church that are aging steadily. HVAC units are somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 a pop, depending on the size of the unit. We have 20 some in our building. So we have to stash that up. But even after you gave $70K to the trustees, that's still $170,000 you're releasing into these ideas every single year. So pay that off, and you've just released a ton of money into this project. Beyond that, if we plan to give an extra $70,000 as a whole congregation, everybody together in 1 year gave $70,000 more than the previous year, then we hit the target. Is that right? That's close, right? Okay. That's close. Now, immediately you're thinking, well, I mean, that's going to be somebody else. Dude, you don't know how easy this is. You want to do the phone trick? Do the phone trick. Do the phone trick. Emily found...
Here's the phone trick.
No, seriously, this is an amazing trick. Get out your phone. Smartphones. Seriously, get out your smartphones. Y'all have one.
Go to your calculator app.
Yeah. This is amazing.
This kind of came out of me the other night like an out-of-body experience. I don't think this way usually, but it just rolled off. Okay, let's see if I can do it now. In your calculator app, do not show your phone to anyone else. That's not the point of this activity. If you put in your phone the number your family gives to College Church annually, Put that number in.
Every year.
Every year. Okay? Divide that number by 52.
Because that's what you're giving.
That's what you're giving weekly, if you will. Multiply that number by 2 and divide it again by 52. So let's start from the beginning. The amount you're giving annually, divide by 52, multiply by 2, and divide by 52 again. The number on your screen, if you did it right, and if I told you right, which I'm not 100% sure I did, that's the amount that we would need everyone who gives regularly to College Church to increase their giving by week in order to hit this target of $70,000 a year. So for most of us, that's a couple trips to Starbucks or one less item at the grocery store that we just picked up because we were wandering and it looked fun to try, et cetera, all these ways. We don't say that because if this really is, and I think it is, about God shaping our culture as a church to be more generous, not only with our stuff, but with our disposition, with our attitude, with our spirits, then this should be the low bar that we just looked at, this number, right? But it also, for me, because I think practically is like, that doesn't really feel that insurmountable. When I look at the graphs and the numbers, sometimes I'm sitting there going, wait, how? And this just helps bring that home. It's everybody doing a bit, and then it's very manageable.
And the bit is small. I mean, figure $10,000, say you give $10,000 a year, all right? I'm just going to make that up because you all, I know, give 5 times that. I know this. But if you give $10,000 a year, what this comes down to is you would end up giving like $7.20 or something like that more every week. That's what you mean. That's 2 trips to Starbucks if you like Starbucks. So, yeah, I mean, think about this. This is not everybody just diving in. Oh, there goes the mortgage. There goes the... No, it's not that at all. It's people just learning to do a little bit consistently. Because remember, and this is something that I think you brought out again and again with the board, what we're doing here, people, this is not a fundraising campaign. If this is a fundraising campaign, you all give a little bit more, so we buy something, and then we all go back to the lifestyle we were at a year ago. This is an anti-fundraising campaign. This is saying, learn a new lifestyle, a little bit more as a new lifestyle. And lo and behold, the funding will be there. So it's not too radical for us to do this. It is not too hard for us.
And I think to that end, I would just add, Chuck, to your question, though these initiatives are largely outward facing, the question becomes what happens internally as we're doing this, right?
Yeah.
And some of this, as we've prayed, the excitement in my heart comes asking, what will we look like by 2028? If God uses us to do these things in this community and in the church writ large.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
And I asked God, what should I give? He said, I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. Put what you want. I'll make sure you get it. And in our society today, we think about giving money away, giving money. Well, if God owns the cattle, let's buy some, because then we have all this blessing. If we can think of it that way, we're getting more out of it than we're putting in. So let's go buy some cattle from him and go forward.
Yeah, beautiful. Pam.
This might be more work for Patrick, but would it be possible to even just put a fund in there, like with the mortgage and the gas and this, of Wonder Space, and then not to take away from people's tithing, but to add to a space, some for Wonder Space, so that when that deadline does approach, we've got something. I don't know. You know what I mean. So I don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, you want to.
Yeah, one of the things that has really been a beautiful wrestling in this, Pam, first, just so you know, we have gone through a long history in the church, and I've only been here for a short portion of it, but of dealing with that. Like, what do we do when there are special projects or things that we feel God's calling us to? And then how do we make sure that people have a means to give to those things? Wonder Space does have a fund, since the example, but here's what I want to challenge us on. This has been a journey of us saying, we want Wonder Space not to be this thing we do on the side. We want Wonder Space to be an investment of College Church. And so part of this, that's really a huge jump. Wonder Space is a large commitment financially, but in absorbing it into this plan, it's been our way to say, this is us. Wonder Space is not this separate thing. It is what we as a body are committed to. And so I hear what you're saying, and I hear your heart. I think it's important, though, that we recognize that we go at this holistically for the sake of taking all these things into who we are, not just things that we do for a season.
Awesome. Yeah. Couple more questions. I want to make sure you get them.
Emily, to go along with what you said, though, right now, of these initiatives, we're not ready to do any of them, right? You're not funding any of them?
Yes.
All right. So you had talked about paying off the mortgage. What if we take that extra money, that 13% or whatever it is, if we are willing to put that, to start that now, how about if we put it in there and say that 13% extra is going to the mortgage? Until you tell us, okay, now we're ready and we want that extra 13% for the whole initiative.
Let me start.
It might take you a year to actually get to the place where you're using our extra money, correct?
Yeah, let me start with what I think might be right, and then you can bail me out in a minute. Okay?
It's a fun game.
If I don't get in too deep. First of all, we do have monies on hand right now to start some of these initiatives. The first year is pretty much covered, if we want it to be, just by the funds that we have on hand, so we can get started immediately. Second, the 13% I'm talking about is in 5 years or 4 years. It's not next year. I started with the high number as a way of saying, if we do this in bite-sized increments, we can grow up to that number, but we may not as the body, unless y'all want to just, do an extra $7 a month. I was assuming that we weren't there yet.
And that 13% increase by fiscal year 29-30 is assuming we have paid off the mortgage, because even if we did nothing different than we're doing today, that should be paid off by fall of 26, Patrick, is that right? Yeah, fall of 26. Yep, so we weren't assuming anything. We just said, even if we keep on keeping on, how as we've been, this is our reality by fiscal year 29-30. It's just an exciting prospect to think we only have $460,000 left on this. I know some of us are way more motivated by debt reduction than others. There are options. Yeah, but thank you, Jan.
And it's a good time to bring that up, because I know some in the room, I think if you're over 70 and a half, I won't ask you to raise your hand now. There are things called RMDs where the government actually fines you. You pay a fine. It's true. I know. Can you believe this? They fine you unless you withdraw like 2.5% of your income, I think it is, of that year. So that's got to happen anyway. What a lot of people in our church do that are older than 70 and a half is they use that time to say, wait a minute, before the government takes it from me, I'm going to give it to the entity I want to serve, and not just any other person. So this would be a great opportunity as we come into December year end for you to think maybe that way. Micah.
Oh, it's over there. As we're going in all these different avenues, you talked about ego being something we're watching out for. I think it's very easy for maybe a subset or a group of people to be so focused on one way that we're not together as one church. So I wonder what steps we're maybe going to take to unify these separate groups. Our hearts are all focused on the kingdom of heaven here and now and how we bring the community into that. But I wonder maybe there's a specific practice of prayer before an event, before a group meeting, in some way that some groups can know what other groups are doing so it can be encouraged by the work God's doing throughout the church, not just in these separate subsets.
Boy, that's a really, really good point. Micah, I don't have a pre-planned answer to give you right now, but I'm really glad you raised the question because we've got to struggle with that. My hunch is that it might start with the board in a sense, right? That we've got to keep the board united so they're not two of them doing this and two of them, I want that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think communication is probably a huge part of this too, which one of the things that I'm grateful for with this plan is it gives us somewhat of a framework for communication. But I've learned over time communication is a two-way street. Like we have a responsibility to put that out there, and then you have a responsibility to read, ingest, give feedback, all of that. So I think if we work together, there is a way that we can, I appreciate the point, and I think it even speaks to the financial piece of it as well. It's something we have to do holistically, not just in those teams. I'm gonna call the 5-minute warning. Okay. Give everybody a 5-minute warning. We're almost done.
That's a good idea.
Still ask your questions. Just
Steve, was your hand up? No? Okay.
Mine's more of a response to Micah's, but I almost wonder too if that's where Pastor has been steering us all along, is getting rid of that ego and pointing out the different groups of Nehemiah. And it almost feels intentional to me that that's where you've taken us at that point, is you've kind of prepared us as these different groups of people to say, hey, we're about to go into this work of building this city, which is what this is. But these are the pitfalls that these different groups might fall into. So I almost wonder too if that's where you've been pointing us in that way as well.
Well, that's a kind answer. That would be more God than me, but we would certainly need it. They heard you, Emily.
It didn't mean you didn't have to ask the question, Steve.
Okay. I'm
not playing by those rules.
You're right. Speaking of football,
it was the football people I sense getting itchy, so I thought I'd give some kind of warning.
It's on tape delay, don't worry. Don't text me. Okay. Yeah.
It's not going to fall as a ministry because we care so much about it. So
beautiful. Can I segue into some of the other, these are slighter changes. I know some of you have heard wind of this. We have reorganized the staff. There's been several changes. We had a leadership team of 3. That was Ethan, Jordan, and Emily. They met with me every other week, and we're actually going to go back to an executive pastor. I have come back from sabbatical, and upon the board's orders, I came back with kind of a clearer picture of what I did and did not need to be involved in anymore. And I came back and said, one of the things I want to not be involved in is administration at all. And when I soft floated that, you guys, every person to the last one went, oh, good. I wasn't sure how to take that. It's like, okay. So it was important for us to find someone then who could lead the administrative part of College West. I've asked Emily to consider that. She's accepted. And so we'll change the structure. That's already effective at the start of this past week. You want to talk about some of the changes in the building that we...
Yeah, a few people have asked what's going on out here in the little courtyard area. This is a first step in our Loving and Serving Our Neighbors Like Jesus initiative. Wonder Space is going to expand a bit to have both indoor and outdoor play. Did I say that okay, Stephanie? Stacy? Okay. So you will start to see we've had between the grant monies and some really wonderful gifted efforts to us by Keyscapes, landscaping. This is happening. If it's happening slowly to your liking, we understand. But when you have volunteer labor, you take it when you can get it. Yeah. So we do believe over the next few weeks that will start to take final shape, final form. Probably won't be well utilized because of the weather until we get to the spring. But hopefully this will become a welcoming space to the community. They'll see play happening out there and know that they're welcome to be a part of that play. And hopefully then they will understand that to be a part of our church too. Whoever mentioned, great eyes, good observation about some of the signage has been coming down because the trustees, thank God for our trustees. I've always felt that way, but in this season, I'm so grateful for people who are thinking not only as to like, what do we need to fix when it's broken, but getting ahead of things. And this has been the last several years, our trustees have really been working the spreadsheets. I hear angels singing, but also just knowing that things are going to start to get older in this building. And so they're getting ahead on some things. So you're going to start to see some painting done in the building, some carpeting. You can't see the HVAC units getting replaced, but they are. But hopefully we will start to see those changes over time emerge and our building being well cared for.
Are all hearts clear? You have honored us the last hour or so by just being here, by engaging with the stuff that we've put in front of you, by leaning in. I can tell by your tone of voice and the speed at which the questions are asked and even the granularity that you are really behind this and you're ready to go. So we're ready to start this like yesterday. We've already started some of the early steps, and I'm excited about where this takes College Church in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to assume y'all are part of it. Am I right? Please? Oh, church, come on. Am I right? Church. All right, sing the doxology with me, and then we will go out.